Alright, real quick, I'm going to go over what to look for if you're buying a used four-wheeler. One of the first things that I always check is the oil. So you come down here, it's going to be on your left or right, just depending on the machine. This one happens to be on the right. And you can take and you can check. That one's pretty black. This isn't mine, this is a lady's that I know. So you want to check that. If it's black, it probably means that it hasn't been changed in a while, but that's what it'll be needing. That's a good talking point with whoever you buy it from. The next thing that I usually check, or one of the other things I usually check first, is the air filter. So you're going to want to take off the seat, and then most of them have the air box right here. Some are easy to get to, some aren't. So if you pull this up, you can look down in there and you can see this one's a little bit dirty. Sometimes they'll be black. Kind of just check the color. If that's not a good color or black, it's a good indication also that it's been neglected. You're going to want to check the battery strength. You can either take a tester, a 12-volt tester, or a light tester and put it on there. And that'll kind of give you a little indication of what the battery's like. They last a few years, not a ton. Next thing you're going to look for, scratches, scrapes, rust. So here you can see rust. I actually just cleaned this four-wheeler up. It looked about like, I don't know if you can see the color. It was about this color, and I just cleaned it up, which means it's been left outside. If it's got fading color to it, see if I can find you somewhere. Okay, right here. So there you can see there's two different colors. Down there as well, you can see there's two different colors, which means it's been left out in the sun. Same with right here. So like I said, I just shined it up, made it look nice. There's just different things you can look for as far as sun fade. Another thing is a seat. Make sure there's no tears or rips in it. They can get pretty expensive. If they do have tears or rips, then you're going to want to see how easy it is to start. If it requires you to, so here's this one. I'm not going to turn on right now, but your choke most of the time is on your left side if it's a carbureted four-wheeler. If it requires the carb to be on, or the choke to be on after it's been started, then it's your carb. Those can be expensive if you don't know how to do it on your own. Most of them will require the choke to be on in order to start it the first time if it hasn't been started in a while. I always ask the person to not have started it before I get there. That way I can see how hard it is to start. But that's one thing I usually check. And then make sure that your lights work. Most of them are on your left side, just to make sure that those are on. They can be pretty expensive if they need to be replaced. These clusters anyways, the lights aren't that expensive. You want to make sure your brakes are tight. Most of them are going to have a left hand brake, a right hand brake, and a bottom foot brake. Make sure they work. This one's a foot shift, so you're going to want to try and see how easy it is to shift when it's on and when it's off. I usually like to do it when it's on. Almost all four-wheelers are 5 up and 1 down. If it's hard to shift, it could be a transmission problem, or it could be because it's idling a little too high. You're going to want to, when you do start it, you're going to want to listen to kind of how it idles. If it sounds like it's idling high, judging by like a lawnmower or something, it could be a carburetor problem. Another thing I look for is the tire tread. These ones are pretty good. If they're worn down a little bit, that's a talking point with the person you're buying it from to try and get their price down a little bit. Everything I've talked to you so far is if you find these problems, they're good things to be able to get lower prices on your four-wheelers. Real fast, right here there's a broken piece. Look for broken plastics. It can either mean it's been abused or it hasn't been fixed in a while. This one, they just happened to get into a little accident. So if there's that, it's a talking point because this is going to be about 20 bucks to replace. This main plastic will be quite a bit more expensive, especially depending on how old or new it is. If it's got a winch, that's a little bit extra price that they might ask for. I usually don't take it into account. It's not a big deal to me. This one came with a plow as well. Plows are good talking points to make sure to get those. One thing that you definitely want to check is down here. You have your CV boots. You're going to want to check to see how good they are. You can pull them apart. Make sure there's no cracks, tears, anything in them. If there are, these aren't real expensive. They're not real hard to change out either. They're just kind of a pain. Make sure that those are good on all sides. So you got them on both steering sides. Like I said, they're not a huge deal. Some of them have their independent suspension. Sorry, I got a cold. If they're independent suspension, they'll have those on the backside too. If you want to check the spring, see how good it is. You can check and see how good of shocks it has, how well it bounces back. Those are kind of some of the main things I look over. Make sure you come up here and you want to look for any oil at all. If there's any oil here, anywhere, here, anywhere along here, if there's any oil, you want to take a look on both sides of the bike, not just on one. If there's any oil, it's not necessarily a huge problem that you're going to have, but you got to probably have a gasket that's going to need to be replaced. And if you can't do that by yourself, that will get pretty costly. So that's another good talking point with people. Like I said, if you have a friend that can do it, it's not too terribly bad. It's just not the most fun thing in the world to do. And those are, I think, the main things that I look at when I'm looking at buying a bike. The petcock you got here, make sure that it works, that your reserve, you're off, you're on, that just kind of glides smoothly. One other thing I guess to think about, when you start it up, you're going to want to rev the engine after it's kind of warmed up. If there's any kind of backfiring or hesitation, that's a carb problem. It's another talking point to them. Just kind of to get them down in price a little bit. That's usually kind of how I do it. Okay, on this side of the bike here, one thing I also like to do is you can test the bearings by if you push in on the tire, or pull in on the tire, and there's any kind of movement or slap, or you can hear or feel anything grinding, that is your bearings, your wheel bearings. Those aren't expensive. None of this stuff, like I said earlier, none of it's expensive. It just can get costly if there are a lot of repairs. You have your tie rods down in here. You're going to want to check to make sure that they're not bent, broken, corroded. I think that piece by piece, you're only looking at $100 for each, just for the piece. If you have somebody install it, it can get a little more pricey. If you can do it yourself, $100 less on everything I've showed you for individual pieces. But if you were to have to do repair on every single one of those things, you could see how it would add up. Some are $10-20, some are $100. Just kind of knowing what you're doing. Do your research on your bike, what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to look like. And those are the general things that I look over when I'm looking at buying a new bike.